Don't you just love to see that? Signs of hope. I never get bored of springtime. Such a beautiful time of the year. There's always hope, friends. God puts hope into every year. And springtime, you've got to read the Songs of Solomon to realise that there's much hope. This place has become a prayer log, basically. Rather than being a log, it's a bench. But it's interesting how they put a cross on a bin. Read into that what you will. But here's some signs of hope here. Here's some signs of hope. I wish I was down at Asbury Village right now, because that place is just so beautiful. Thousands and thousands of daffodils there this time of year. But we are where we are. And at the moment, I apologise that I'm not sort of filming in very exciting locations at the moment. There's a few reasons for it. We're really busy trying to do all the kind of basic repair things on the camper van while V's in Africa, because it's her house, and you know, we have to bring things in the house and do work in the house, and I don't want her to think that we're taking advantage. So while she's away in Africa, we're getting those jobs done. Secondly, it's the fuel prices, folks. They've gone through the roof, and I know everybody's now thinking about ways of just beginning to save some money. I'll sort you out in a minute, Jess. I'm going to do these questions first. So somebody has lost a loved one, and every week or every 2 weeks they put some flowers down on this bench. So I'm going to get a set of flowers, so only the person who knows will know that it's not the flowers they've put there. And I'm going to put a little gospel tract in there, obviously not about hell. You know, when people are broken, the way that you approach them with the gospel is different, and it's still the gospel, you still go through it, but the way that you approach that person is different. Jesus resisted the proud but gave grace to the humble. Okay, so I'm using my tablet again, and don't mock this, by the way. If Russia start to use EMPs, this is the kind of tablet you're going to be using too. So there's a lot going on in Revelation chapter 11. I think we can appreciate as we went through it together, and that chart is phenomenal, isn't it? There's a lovely guy called Tim who's on RTN that showed me that chart. I'd like to get that made into a t-shirt if possible. I think it would make an amazing t-shirt. Anyway, so we're going to get into this study. Now, I know that some of you go on Zoom for 40 minutes, some of you meet together physically, some of you do a kind of a hybrid between the two. But I can't help this chapter. It is more involved, and there's things that we need to understand in this chapter before we go any further. So let's get into it then. So discussion point number one, list the scriptures. By the way, please start by reading Revelation chapter 11. List the scriptures that point to a literal temple being rebuilt in the last days. So there's a good few scriptures that clearly point to a temple of some sort being rebuilt on the Temple Mount in the last days. So rather than me quote those to you, it's much better if you find them. That's the first point. Secondly then, what do you think it will take for this temple being rebuilt on the Temple Mount? What do you think it will take for that event to happen? What do you think it will take for that event to happen? Okay then. So third discussion point, list the ways in which Elijah and John the Baptist's ministry parallel each other. Use scripture to do that. So list the ways in which Elijah and John the Baptist's ministry parallel each other. Why are we looking at that? Because the only way that you can really understand one of the witnesses that either is Elijah or comes in the spirit of Elijah, the only way that you can understand what he's saying prophetically at that time is to understand what Elijah and John were saying. So make a list of those things, try and put them together, and you'll see something emerging that's very, very different than the way that we present the gospel today. Okay, so point number 4 then. Try to summarize the ministry of the two witnesses. Try to summarize the ministry of the two witnesses. I know in groups it's always difficult because some people, their minds are wired in such a way that they can take a lot of information and simplify it, and other people go off on tangents all over the place. You've got to discipline your mind sometimes to think, okay, here's all the information, how can I summarize this? You know, when you go out street preaching, I spent years going out street preaching in the earlier days, years going out on my own a lot of the time. And when we went to Germany and Albania and Budapest, you'd got 3 minutes to give your testimony. 1 minute on what your life was like, 1 minute on what happened at the point of salvation, and 1 minute on where you are now. And it was an awesome discipline, because you've got to take all the things that you deem important about how you got saved and whittle it down to the absolute bare necessities. It's a good discipline. It's one thing that I really do agree with my grandma about, who's a Methodist lay preacher, is that if you can't say it in 10 minutes, it's not worth saying. Now that sounds like I'm being hypocritical, because I do go on a bit, but if you can't say it in 10 minutes, it is not worth saying. It's a really important discipline. So why do I say that? Try to summarize the ministry of the two witnesses. Bring it all together. What is that ministry at that time? Okay, point number 5. Who is the other of the two witnesses? Who is the other one? Now, the candidates, I suppose, are Enoch, Moses, and John, the writer of the Gospel of John, the beloved disciple whom Jesus loved. Now, you can make a case for all of these. So, using scripture, try your best to substantiate your claims for who the other witness is. And again, don't let it go on too long, because there's other stuff that we need to be looking at here. But it's a good discipline to go away and think about all 3, which one most fits the description of Revelation 11 and the cross references. Okay, so on Sunday morning something really amazing happened. Margaret's phone went off in Bible reading mode and started to read out aloud for everybody to hear Luke chapter 10 verse 1. Now Luke 10 verse 1 is pivotal to understanding the application of Revelation 11. And I couldn't believe, sometimes you get a message ready. I've been thinking about Revelation 11 for a month now. And sometimes you get a message ready and the Lord just gives you a little bit of confirmation before, and it warmed my heart, actually. So read these 2 scriptures together, because these are pivotal. Acts 1:8, you shall be my witnesses. Acts 1:8, but also Luke 10:1. Now what's interesting about Luke 10:1 is that he sends them out in 2s to every village before the Lord got there. That is so beautiful. He sent them out in 2s to each village before the Lord got to that village. They were preparing the way. And it's a lovely picture You know, you shall be my witnesses. So in a microcosm, what's happening in Revelation 11 is on a global stage. But in a microscopic way, in our own way, we've been sent out before the Lord too, as a witness before he comes. It's really interesting. Now, we looked at the analogy of the Titanic and the ship that saved those survivors, Carpathia. And by the way, I went through this entire book on Sunday night. You can listen to it online on YouTube for free. But it took me 5 hours. But if anybody wants this book, you can have it, because it will really, really bless you. It begins by talking about an author that, I think it was 6 or 7 years before the Titanic was launched. This author wrote a book about a luxury going liner that would house within it all the well-to-do people of the society at that time. And this ship in the book would hit an iceberg, and he called the name of the ship Titan. How unbelievable. So highly prophetic. Not only that, but when you think that all 5 compartments on the Titanic would have to be cut open in order for that ship to sink, then it was a distinct iceberg, and trajectory, angle, everything would have to be perfect to go through all of those chambers to cause that boat to go down. They could have hit a number of icebergs and remained floating, but they just hit this particular iceberg in that particular way, which caused that ship, the unsinkable ship, to go down. Bearing in mind that that piece of ice would have broken off from Greenland, which is that iceberg would have been on a journey of 2,000-3,000 miles to get in those shipping lanes just at that time when the Titanic is coming. And like I say, the Titanic could have hit all kinds of different icebergs and not have gone down. But it hit this one in such a way, this iceberg had been floating for around about 2 years. 2 years. And it was in the wrong place at the wrong time, and it took down the Titanic. However, we looked at Carpathia. We looked at this amazing achievement of the captain, that once he realised that the Titanic was going down, his efforts were outstanding. And so when you think about those efforts, that he cut off all heating to the crew and the folk on the ship, he drove all power to the engines to get to the Titanic, which was 60 miles away, 2 hours. I explained this on Sunday morning. He cleared the decks, he cleared the rooms, made them into hospitals, got the ladders ready, got all the lifeboats prepared to drop, risked the life even of their own passengers by going through an ice field at full tilt to get to the Titanic. It's just an amazing thing. Now, in the light of all that, are we responding to the distress call today? Now, the distress call today is not necessarily coming from the lost. It's coming via Jesus. Jesus tells us there's a distress call. And so we know there's a distress call because Jesus tells us there are many on the road to hell. He tells us that in Matthew chapter 7, 13 and 14. So, in the light of the Carpathian, in the light of Acts chapter 1:8, you're going to be my witnesses. Notice, you shall receive power and become my witnesses. What does it say in Revelation 11? They receive power to become his witnesses. Same thing, just on a much smaller scale. Luke chapter 10:1, they went out in twos before the Lord. Amazing scripture. They went into the cities and the towns before the Lord got there. absolutely amazing. So my question is this: if it's all hands on deck, which it really is, if the church is doing what it should be doing, and it's literally all hands on deck, then what do you think your part is in this final rescue mission before the rapture of the church? What's your part in this? And folks, you just got to, you know, there are people that I know that have been saved 10 years that still don't know what their part is. Whereas there's other people, and there are people in our church that they're there on the doors, they're tidying up the church, they're doing this, they're doing that, they're doing the other thing. And even if they don't think they've got a visible part, they're still busy. There's other people in the church that I know this. They're looking out for new people, or people that potentially seem to be lonely, and they're there on them. They know what their part is. They know, and even if they don't think it's their main part, they're busy doing stuff before perhaps that main part happens. There's no room for people to stand around doing nothing. It's a huge rescue operation. I think if the Lord really showed us the predicament of it, we'd be like Daniel, we'd be in a daze for days. What is your part? You know, and you'll probably find that people in your group will say to you, yeah. And you know, if you think it's something that you're not, they'll probably tell you that as well, in love. But we've all got a part to play. You know, we've got house group leaders. Some of them are in the 70s. We've got house group leaders that are in the 20s and 30s, and they're doing an amazing job. And the house groups are doing really, really well. There's so many aspects to this rescue operation before the Lord returns. Okay, so that's that. Now, interestingly enough, Ken, who's travelled the world a bit, I did know this anyway, but I didn't kind of make the link like Ken did. He said, do you know where the Carpathian Mountains are? Well, the Carpathian Mountains are in Eastern Europe, and they go across the borders of Romania and the Ukraine and so on, and Slovakia. You've got, as part of that, you've got the Tatra Mountains as well. But it's very interesting that the Carpathian Mountains are on that border, and what's happening right now on that border? There's a rescue operation for the Ukrainians that are desperate to get out. And so you've got churches all around, you know, whether it be Romania or Slovakia or even Moldova or Poland, that are housing these people now, Christians. It's Carpathia all over again. I'm going to try and speak to a Romanian pastor this week who's housing refugees. His church are housing refugees, and I'm going to try and ask him if he'll do a couple of videos. I don't know the man actually, but if he'll do a couple of videos, because it would be nice if we can also be a part of that. And we will do our best to make sure that this is absolutely legitimate. However, if you're the kind of Christian that thinks, I'm not going to give unless it is utterly rubber stamped, like we know for certain, well, the truth is, when you're giving in these ways, you're never 100% certain that the money is going to get there, you know? But the Lord knows our heart. So we want to try and help if we can. So I'm going to talk to this guy and we'll see what comes of it. Okay, so there's a lot. I know there's a lot in this, but it's a huge chapter. Okay, so finally then, and this goes without saying, and I'm sure you'll do this anyway, but pray for Eastern Europe. Pray for the peace of Eastern Europe and the peace of Jerusalem. We've been looking at this thing that's going to take place in Jerusalem. Ultimately, there's only one peace plan that's going to work, and it's the gospel, the gospel of peace. We know that. But what an opportunity all those churches around the border of Ukraine have got now to be to get involved in the rescue operation, both physically and spiritually. I just think that's fantastic. I know people in our church would love to have a house on that border. They'd have those doors wide open right now. So there's a lot to go at. Like I say, I've already spoke to Viv and Ray because they don't have that time. Whatever you don't discuss, you can always do in your own time anyway, but it's a very rich chapter, and I'm sure for Viv particularly it's a very special chapter, because ultimately this is all bringing about the fulfillment of that final prophecy that those that survive, that call out, blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord, all Israel shall be saved. So it's very, very exciting. It's been such a blessing going through Revelation this time. It really has. It's just been an absolute honour. So yeah, I'll go and throw the dog into this pool for a bit, and I'll get back and do a bit more on this camper van. God bless you. Have a wonderful time in your meetings, and we'll see you soon.